So again, as I said, we're going to start our recording right now. And I would like to formally invite everyone here to our podcast cohort presentation. And I say right here, it's it may be rather grandiose of me to say so, but I would say it's a new frontier in education, particularly when it comes to podcasting in classrooms. I've heard of teachers using podcasts as a way of giving content to their kids, but I've yet to hear of any teachers who, some have used it in place of a project, but not something integral like a PBL style thing for their curriculum. So I really think we're on the cutting edge frontier here of education, and I'm definitely proud of being on this frontier, and I hope you guys can join me in this as well. Before I begin to introduce myself, I would like to say a quick few words. I would just like to say how honored I am to be in your guys' presence as teachers. As at least I know Ms. Sizemore knows, I published an episode recently talking about the difficulties of being a teacher, and it's probably one of my favorite episodes that I've ever recorded. It came from a reflection of mine from teaching it's a tutoring class, right? A tutoring class for a week last week, and I was able to kind of experience what it was like grading homework, assigning homework, lecturing, and it really just made me keenly aware of how difficult it is being a teacher, and just it deepened my respect for you guys. So,
But you can put in the skillet.
So I'm gonna start with my introductions here. Hi, Ms. Korea. How are you doing?
Hey. Well, hello. Hi. This is my friend.
Yes.
Mark,
Oh.
you didn't tell me I'd be on TV.
I didn't know. I wasn't sure I put my video on because I'm on my phone.
Ah, I see. All right. Great. It's great to have Ms. Korea here. She's been helping me throughout this entire process of getting it to you guys. Of course, she has been the one who recommended you guys to me, along with my own recommendation.
Yeah.
But again, I would like to start off with some introductions here. If you guys don't know me, my name is David Chen. I'm a proud alumni of Merced High School, just recently minted. I'm an amateur podcaster. I would label myself as that. Been one for about over a year now. And as of now, I will be an incoming freshman for 2024. So before we get into obviously the logistics in it of itself,
I guess.
in this project, I just want to go over my journey, right? As a podcaster,
I had to turn off that part.
how this whole project came about.
I just turned off the video.
Ms. Korea, do you mind introducing yourself just so we can hear this well?
Hello, everybody.
Oh, Ms. Korea.
Hey, I want to tell everybody that's joining us is that we are having an opportunity of a lifetime here with David Chen. And I am super excited. Not that it matters, but I already know that David has such high aspirations that I can't wait to see what you're going to accomplish in your life. But besides that, I'd like to be part of it. And so I'm just super excited that you're willing to take some time out of your life to share your passion with us. So thank you.
Yes, no, yeah, it's my pleasure and my honor, because as I will say right here, it's been a long time coming for me to have realized this as my passion, and I realized this as my dream, really, to bring this to fellow classmates of mine. And that starts with you guys, and that starts with your efforts. And yeah, so as a quick introduction, like I said, I started I run this podcast called We the Students. I started it back in March of 2019, and it started from very humble beginnings. It started as an English teacher. Shout out to Mrs. Chiesa for English, AP English language. She suggested it, right, as a simple thing to do instead of normal slides for a group project of mine. And yeah, it just evolved from there. It started off as a group project, but then from there, I was able to secure a mic from the library. Nicholson, our previous librarian, was kind enough to buy one for me. And from there, I was interviewing friends, interviewing teachers as well. And it evolved from season to season, because we have 3 seasons total. Season 1 was March of 2019 to the end of that year. season 2 was at the beginning of my senior year till winter break, where we were just hammering away at episodes. I brought on the co-host, Cal Slatton, you may know him. It was just an amazing process. And of course, season 3 is where we really began to evolve and branch out into multiple projects. I was able to help out a middle schooler from Crookshank start the podcast, talking about middle school sports. It's a very interesting niche. I got someone, I was a collaborator for another podcast called COVID-18. You guys may have heard of it. It's run by Rachel Livenall from El Capitan High School. And I also was able to play a hand in the district's opening of their podcast, Impact, an MUHSD production by Sam Yaniguez. So it's just really gratifying to see the scope at which something small, simply from a teacher's suggestion, was able to evolve into. And I think that should empower all of you guys as well, that, really it was quite literally 4 words, how about a podcast, that transcended and snowballed into all of this. So you guys have an amazing influence on students, and it could turn into something like this. And right here, as I say, and this is without a doubt, I can guarantee, by far the most fulfilling experience in my high school years. And I learned more in the studio than in any other classroom. But that doesn't mean I'm not taking anything away from the classroom. It's more along the lines that podcasts offered something completely unique and exceptional that I just couldn't have found in a classroom. And we'll talk about some of those things. So what did I learn about podcasting? And it's these 3 big things that I want to talk about in future slides as well, which I think every student can learn and every student can discover, which was finding a voice, taking initiative, and ownership of learning. And one other thing I think I did learn that is notable to mention here is the stories I found. So throughout my 4 years in high school, I saw probably hundreds of faces, right? I'm sure you guys do as well. And, for me at least, many of these faces are just simply faces across the hallway during break, during lunch, and they were part of the background noise simply of the environment. And through this podcast, I was able to interview students from every walk of life. We had one who talked about owning an alligator jerky business, and someone who, was able to rescue themselves from depression through just pure optimism. And these stories in and of itself were unique to each and one of them. And then you really do begin to realize that each of these background faces that you see hundreds of times over every day, they all carry that level of intricacy for their life. And it really makes you wonder, like, I can speak with every one of them and be able to find something beautiful in their story. And it really made me realize the extraordinary environment I was in, despite it being modest, despite it just being a high school campus, right? But everyone has a story. And I think same thing here in classrooms. I believe we should be able to bring out that story in everyone. So I just want to list out a couple emotions, right? So what did I feel podcasting? I had a sense of excitement, solidarity, especially with my team, with my co-host, with my producer, with my social media manager. I'm not too great at that, so they helped me along with that line. And I think also something important here is a sense of responsibility for the content I create. One of the meaningful encounters I had was with a parent who came up to me and said, "I absolutely loved your podcast. I think I interviewed his daughter, and excuse me. He just told me how much he enjoyed and how much he liked what I was doing." And that in of itself was enough motivation for me to continue on for the rest of my life podcasting, because I know someone got enjoyment from it, and that was enough for me. And of course, the last one, which I think is maybe the most important, is a sense of empowerment. Knowing that I created something permanent that's out there on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, that has audiences of millions, and that it's meaningful and it reached out to people who feel as though it helped them, right? And I think these 4 feelings, right? I think every student deserves to have these feelings of school, and I think it's achievable, especially in podcasting. So again, like I said, the 3 main things, right? I wanted to talk a little bit more about what this means for any student. And I also want to dedicate a slide particularly talking about how this is relevant for distance learning. I know this coming semester, there's been rough talk of what distance learning is going to look like for our high school classrooms. And no matter how it's going to go, I really do believe podcasts have become even more relevant for teachers to use as a way to keep their kids engaged and learning in these extraordinary circumstances. So the first one, finding a voice. I mean, this one's very obvious. Podcast in and of itself is a platform for you to voice out your thoughts, your feelings. And for my voice, being able to express that, my interests, my passions, was just amazingly gratifying, to the point of it being therapeutic. I was able to come in and whether it was talking about what I felt, what was wrong about my environment, whether it was like we talked about graduation, how I thought everyone should be able to wear the same robes and have a sense of solidarity. Just stuff like that. Being able to share my concerns, and even it could have been fun. We talked about the importance of going to concerts for high school students and how that's overlooked because it's a sense of culture, right? It's a sense of tribalism where, you have same interests in music, just a bunch of things. I looked forward to it every day, and I really did feel empowered, right? To be able to say that I have a thought and I'm able to put that on audio waves and make that publishable to a platform. And it really was just meaningful to me. But what I think this means for all students is that in general, I think student voice particularly, is just missed or overlooked in some classrooms. And occasionally curriculum can feel detached, right? And that may contribute to student disengagement or disinterest. And I think really, if you were able to shine a light on a student's voice, it makes it personal. It makes them attached. It makes them engaged. And also, I think this particularly applies to students in stressful environments where they may need to present these concerns or present their thoughts and emotions. And finally, of course, especially in our current climate of social movements and social change, I think the message of equal vocality for podcasts, having everyone be able to share their voice and opinions, benefits BIPOC students, BIPOC communities, and underrepresented students in general. And you may be asking, like, okay, so this seems to be along the lines of, giving students their own chance to podcast, right? This is not necessarily relevant to my my coursework or my curriculum. But as you will see in a future slide, we will talk about the how I envision podcast for students. It includes giving them a chance to podcast on their own and give them their creative freedom, and then applying that towards more curriculum-focused ideas. But we will go over that. Again, for distance learning relevancy here, I think voice can be particularly hampered in distance learning. Simply put, a Google Classroom is a very, very detached way of being able to communicate. So giving them an outlet for communication with their students or with their classmates, with teachers, will help tremendously, right? And of course, taking initiative, the second of the three topics I wanted to talk about. Proactive learning is what podcasts is all about, where the students are taking the responsibility of going out and exploring and discovering content and the relevant topics. While reactive learning is more along the lines of, I give the information to the students, I feed them, and they're just their hands open receiving it, and it's less sustainable. And I think, truthfully, proactive learning is deeper learning, right? The way I approach podcasts in classrooms, I think that students will be the forefront of finding information. And this has been the theme of like project-based learning in general. And of course, it like echoes the idea of being the guide at the side versus being the sage on the stage. And I guess to give another metaphor here, it keeps kids hungry, right? If you give them the proactivity to pursue information, it makes them hungry rather than feeding them, right? It's very key distinctions between the two. And of course, like I said, proactive learning is a much more sustainable model for classrooms than reactive learning, as I'm sure you guys may have experienced the last few months of semester, where simply put, it was tough to maintain engagement simply using Google Classroom or some other e-learning tool. And finally, I want to talk about ownership of learning, because I think this is probably the most important aspect of podcasting. Proprietary learning, right? Being the sole owner, proprietor of what you learn and what you create, it's much more permanent. And like I said, it's something truly gratifying knowing that you created something permanent. I call it the content creator high, knowing that, oh my God, this 30-minute segment I made, just like yesterday's episode where I talked about my teacher experience, having Miss Sizemore give me feedback, that was just a beautiful feeling for me as well, because I know that I created something that is permanent on air, and someone else listened to it and got something out of it. So I really think that it makes students accountable for what they learn or discover, and it also gives them a measurement of progress, right? Or sorry, it substantiates their efforts, right? They put in this effort to create this content. They will see people listening to it, and they will see people reacting to it. And I think that reaction and involvement is crucial for a student's engagement. And of course, taking ownership of learning, like I said, gives attachment, right? Which is just simply missing in a lot of like just simple Google Classroom stuff. And these all tie in together, right? Voice, ownership, initiative, and they all combine into this really wonderful, engaged fulfillment that I just think is just unique. And I think I'm just kind of pouring over the emotions that I feel while I podcast, and it's the same thing. I really think that every student could feel this way. And of course, it may sound like a daunting task, right, to have podcasts be the sole tool that you guys, well, not sole, but the major tool to use in the classroom. But I can't stress enough that it's never been easier to make a podcast. Similarly, how Wix, Weebly, and Squarespace has practically terraformed how we think about making podcasts, where 10 years ago, you had to have coding experience in HTML, know how to buy domain names and secure it, encryption, everything. That was really high learning curve to make a website. But nowadays, I mean, I literally timed myself the other day. It took me 4 minutes and 30 seconds to make a website with my name on it. So I think it's the same idea here with podcasts. It's never been easier. And nowadays, you have Soundtrap, Anchor, Spreaker, these software capabilities that, by the way, all run on Chrome OS, meaning students can access it on their Chromebooks. So they can go from step one to last step entirely on their Chromebook. Everything from the digital audio workstation is, where they edit and, add in music and stuff, to their recording. Of course, actually recording the tracks for their podcast, and of course the publishing, which is free, user-friendly, zero cost, right? Especially given that everyone's issued a Chromebook. There's zero barrier to entry and practically minuscule learning curve. And I think this has been the perfect opportunity for us to consider it for education. So my vision for student podcasting involves multiple skills, right? Like, try to imagine this with me, right? Along their process for a student, right? Like in their topic, their research and discovery, students pursue their relevant topic with the mindset, right? With the mindset that this will be for their audience. And I think that is a very crucial aspect that is missing in standard coursework. Because if you do a worksheet knowing that it's going to be thrown away next week, it's very difficult to become attached to that worksheet, right? It's difficult to become attached to that thing what that worksheet is trying to tell you. And it gives deeper meaning. It deepens the level of learning that you get. And it gives them motive, right? They're not just learning for them anymore. They're learning so to teach someone else. And I think that is the crucial relationship you need to build for a student in order to get them truly excited to learn. And last but not least, I'm sure you guys know this. I certainly do. I know classmates who do this. They do the minimal amount of work, right? They just try to get past right through, squeak right through. And that's because their motive is to get the grade, when now the motive is not just to get the grade, but is to appeal to an audience. So they know they must research, not just to know or comprehend, but to understand, to create good content for their audience. And of course, during the actual production and the interview or recording, conversational skills, I think it's super underrated in school. Just a year ago, I would have been stuttering all along. I'm still stuttering probably, but my communication skills were definitely much worse than they are now. Students can learn the power of tone, inflection, volume that influences how people listen to you, right? And of course, there's all these real world application skills of scripting, of impromptu speaking, and of course, interview. And again, this is where the real world comes in for podcasting. It's not just some sort of isolated vehicle that's only relevant for school. It's relevant in real life as well. And of course, the post-production, right? You get to know audio editing, which in a vacuum is a good skill to learn. Teamwork, resource allocation, in terms of delegating tasks. These are all just classic skills that also are part of podcasting. So you see how like holistic this whole process is. Everything from deepening their purposes for learning to real world applications to, of course, teamwork and collaboration. It all includes in the process, right? So now onto like actual, like what are we planning on doing with you guys, right? Like, why are you guys here? Why are you guys potentially in this program? Basically, what our process is the 3-step process where we want to familiarize you with the technology first, right? Because understand, teaching someone information where you may not be too familiar with is a very scary position, right? So we want to make sure that you become masters of podcasts first before you make your students masters of podcasts. And then we're gonna assess what what podcasting will look like for your classroom, right? It looks different based off the teacher, the subject, your school, and your student base, your demographic. You know, a podcast in an English class for upperclassmen doesn't look the same as, you know, a math class for freshmen. And of course, we want to understand your environment for teaching, for your specific environment, before we consider actually implementing it into your lesson plans. And then that's where this comes in, where we want to plan a PBL unit using podcasts, right? Where we aim to do it for the first 2 or 3 weeks of school. Because irregardless, the first week of school is generally dedicated to non-content, non-curriculum work. And it'll be a great time to use that time instead to introduce them to a fun project, in this case, podcasting. And of course, the resources that you will have at hand is, of course, myself, Ms. Carrillo, and I've also applied and been accepted to a program called Harvard Spark, which connects Harvard advisors to incoming freshmen who are doing service projects in the community, which just so happens to be me. So we're in great company. And of course, the timeline. It's roughly 3 weeks, so I understand it's you know, basically a decent chunk of the remainder of the summer. But the idea is to do these steps week by week. The first step, like I said, is week 1, where we introduce you guys to the software, to the podcast basics, the logistics, to get you guys familiar. And then, of course, week 2 is to actually get you guys to make an episode, potentially. Is to get you guys to actually get, you know, boots on the ground, get your feet wet, you know, go through the process end to end, and to get yourself familiar, right? And of course, week 3 is where we start integrating into your guys' lesson plans for the start of the school, and that's where we look into, you know, what this will look like for your students, how to best approach it, ideas for projects, which I will go over. And after those 3 weeks, we will be open for follow-ups. If you still need checkups or further support, I will definitely be here. Especially if Harvard decides to maintain online courses this year, I would definitely be home in my second. Oh, and of course, we will be starting July 13th, where next week is devoted to me interviewing any further interested parties one-on-one to get a better idea of what your expectations are and to get everyone on the same page. So again, this is an example of what, okay, my meeting will end in 10 minutes. I can definitely hit that. Okay, sorry, I'm on the free version, so like I said, they only give me 10 minutes here. So this is like a sample of what a lesson plan will be like, right, for the beginning of school. Week 1, or like from Wednesday, I'm pretty sure school starts Wednesday, you can familiarize students with podcasting. You can get them listening to podcasts. You know, there's a bunch of good introductory podcasts that like cover all the basics of, oh, it has good scripting, it has good background music, it has good voice and tone inflection, and you can maybe introduce them to the actual curriculum topic. Then week 2, this is important week because I want to give students a chance to make a podcast of their own, give them control first and creative freedom to explore, discover, and get used to it. And then week 3 is the actual week where you ask them to make a podcast regarding your specific topic, depending on your subject, depending on your pace, whatever that may be. And of course, this is important. Reflection is key because hopefully, you know, fingers crossed, if this goes well, this could be even a reoccurring unit where if your students have good feedback, you can maybe repeat it per semester, or something along those lines where every single iteration it gets better because of your student feedback. And oh, this worked, this didn't, this could have been better, we needed this here, stuff like that. So it can only get better from there. And I just want to list some examples that I thought of potential projects, right? Like where biology, for instance, could be like a molecular journalist where you pair up students and one acts like a protein and the other is like a molecular journalist that interviews that protein, asks them where it goes, where it's been in the cell, where it's planning on being, how long its life is. It has applications for every subject. Foreign language is an easy one. You can do a podcast about being a tour guide in your native country. English, of course, Socratic circles are basically podcasts without the microphone, and you can maybe tweak that so it sounds a little bit better for audiences. I also did one in the Sizemores class. I did an audiobook book recommendation episode or book review episode. And same thing here. Math is also applicable. You can take real world applications of math concepts and put them into like storyboards, right? Where two students could pretend to be Black Friday shopping, and they list out their processes of combining discounts, proportions, etc. Of course, this is specifically for algebra, pre-algebra or algebra 1, but I feel like it can be applicable to statistics, calculus, algebra 2, geometry, trigonometry, anything. And again, others, English learner, history, even PE as well. If we're distance learning, kids can be working on fitness, like talking about fitness, talking about their nutrition, stuff like that. So really, every subject has potential here. And I'd just like to end off with simply stating my dream here, which I think every student has an intrinsic love for learning. It's just it's not tapped into, right, for some. I think everyone has some sort of passion that, if given the chance to show it, will bloom. I mean, I feel like my chance to do podcasting really gave me the chance to find my passion, and school became that much more valuable to me. And I woke up every day literally excited to get out of my bed. And I think that's the vision that we need to paint for every single one of our students.
That's right.
And I'm just excited for the bigger picture here, because on the shorter end of the spectrum, I'm hoping for students to get into podcasting. But in the larger picture, I'm hoping to tackle the problem of student disengagement, student disinterest in classrooms, and hopefully turning that culture around to something that is much more meaningful and engaged. And of course, I think every student should be proud of the work they're doing, right? Proud of the work that is meaningful and can be put out into the world. I remember the first time I realized my podcast was listened to internationally. Someone from Spain listened to my podcast and it showed up on my statistics board. And it was amazing. I completely freaked out because, it was significant. Someone from another country listened to my content. It was just amazing. And I think every student deserves their voice to be heard somewhere by someone. So that about concludes my presentation here.